Pixar has come a long way from making shorts. They changed the animation game by making the first fully linked computer animated film, are responsible for creating some of the most iconic characters, have made people laugh, cry, and have had a huge impact on storytelling by creating so many magical moments. The studio currently has 20 films, which I'm going to be putting in order with my favorite movie at the top and the movie I seriously despise at the bottom. When organizing any sort of favorites, I think mainly about which one I enjoy the most, even if I know another film is technically a lot better. So let's see just how well these stories stack up. Enjoy as I count down the Pixar movies, worst to best. Number 20, Cars 3. I don't know anybody above the age of 5 who wanted this movie to be made. Maybe John Lasseter, but he didn't even direct it. This is the third movie that continued to build on a world that I don't care about. Lightning McQueen crashed in the beginning and I felt no sympathy for him. They make it out to be such a big deal in the trailer, but he's totally fixed up in the next scene, which makes me wonder if I should even care about the well-being of these characters. Doc Hudson dies, but how do they determine when a car is gonna give out? Shouldn't they be prepared to fix each other at all times? How are new cars made? What happens to them when they die? This movie just goes from one pointless scene to the next. I guess some of the locations are creative, like the Demolition Derby, but they just hang out at each place for a bit and then move on. They don't show Lightning McQueen slowly being changed by each training. But okay, the plot of this movie is just filled with a bunch of mindless action, which they didn't care enough to tie some deep lessons into. But there is one thing they seem to take seriously in this movie, and that's the most offensive thing about Cars 3. Cruise. We get one short speech from this beach about being discriminated against, which totally comes out of nowhere, and that's the only thing we're supposed to build our sympathy on. Even though when we do see somebody telling her she doesn't belong on the racetrack, she actually lets it get to her and tries to walk or drive away. It's so disgusting seeing her get all this attention at the end, and even take Doc's number when she doesn't deserve it. She makes that one speech, she lets those same things she says she hates get to her, and then she just gets everything she wanted anyway. That's a terrible lesson. And on top of that, they set up Lightning's conflict to be about self-doubt and him dealing with the fact that he can't do the things he used to, and in the end, he's right. He can't win a race on his own. How pathetic. If they wanted to show him maturing and make the decision himself to become a trainer, then that would be one thing, but he doesn't. He said he wanted to prove he still got it in him, but he turns out to be the old has-been people were saying he was the whole movie. He doesn't come to terms with that. He just moves on to a new profession by training crews who doesn't even deserve his help. I have no idea why people say Cars 3 is the best in the trilogy. The only thing I've heard most people compliment is the more adult take, but they don't follow through with their lessons, which I believe is the worst thing about this movie, and worthy of the bottom spot on this list. Number 19, The Good Dinosaur. This is the most nothing movie I've ever seen. It's an hour and a half of dinosaurs just living their lives. Now that could have been made interesting, but the only conflict is the main character needing to get back home. They try and throw in a new obstacle towards the end with some crazy pterodactyls who want to kill Spot because this movie thought it needed a bad guy in like the last 30 minutes. However, before this moment, we've seen the main characters do nothing but walk around unbothered. So this is just some real jarring contrast that doesn't work. The only good thing are the landscapes. They clearly put all their effort into the backgrounds, which are breathtaking. The imagery in the credits is better than anything in the entire movie. Too bad it's contrasted with these disgusting Play-Doh-looking dinosaurs. The production history for this movie was a hot mess, and it really shows. They introduced their main lesson in the beginning, and it's the bare minimum one about proving yourself, but Arlo does nothing throughout his journey to be able to say he did that. They still let him make his mark at the end though, just because they needed a cool shot. I debated putting this at the bottom of my list, just because nothing happens, but I'd rather take a movie that's incredibly boring than one that actually gets me frustrated. So The Good Dinosaur, the movie where you'll forget everything that happens as soon as it happens. Number 18, Cars 2. A movie dedicated to Mater and the shenanigans that ensue as he pretends to be a spy. All the cliches and stupid jokes you can think of after hearing that are in this movie. A lot of people say this is the worst Cars film, but I'd much rather watch Mater derp around on screen for an hour than have a movie that tries to further the story and fails miserably, as Cars 3 did. Not much else to say about this, but just that it's a dumb spy film with cars, because them being cars is guaranteed to make a film that much more interesting, I guess. Number 17. Brave. A boring cliche premise that they don't do anything new or creative with, except turn one of the main characters into a bear. This movie needed a lot more atmosphere. It needed more fantasy elements like the Wisp. Otherwise, when they're just following through with the story of a princess who doesn't want to be a princess, I spend my time thinking about all the other movies that did that way better. A lot of time is spent just talking, which would have been fine if it wasn't all generic inspirational junk, and if I actually cared about the people speaking. The movie prides itself on its inspirational lesson about being able to change your own fate and being in charge of your own destiny. So I was surprised the first time I saw this to hear that wasn't even Merida's request when she goes to the witch. If Merida's supposed to be a strong, rebellious kid, why does she have to change her mom? In The Little Mermaid, when Ariel's dad physically destroys the thing she loves, causing Ariel to run away and ask a witch for help, she changes herself, not her dad. Imagine if she asked for King Triton to be turned into a human. That would only leave us to see at the end that they understand each other, instead of getting these moments where Triton himself realizes he messed up, and Ariel being able to see what she really wants out of life. The only thing Merida seems to be hit with at the end is the realization that she needs her mom and doesn't want to lose her, but duh! She said says she'd rather die than be like her mom. That doesn't mean she wants her mom to die. Thanks, you little witch. Apart from some scenes showing off the atmosphere and the lesson when taken away from the context of this movie, Brave is the story of one forgettable princess. Number 16. Finding Dory. I don't know how people say this is better than the original. Finding Dory was just another film in Pixar's scheme to bank on people's nostalgia. They were betting on the fact that people would be so excited to see all their favorite characters again that they won't care what they do, so much that they ignore the fact that the new stuff they're doing either isn't interesting or is just a poor rehash of something they did better in the original. The tie-ins to the first movie are some of the cheapest connections I've ever seen in a sequel. They use Crush just to get from point A to point B, and then just reshoot the anglerfish scene from the first one, but this time with a squid. This movie also just has no stakes the way Finding Nemo did. There's no reason Dory needed to rush off and find her parents the way Marlin needed to rush after the boat the second they introduced that conflict. They lazily throw in a time limit towards the end where Dory needs to save her friends, but already sat through an hour of needless filler, making this quick change totally unnecessary. The most frustrating thing this movie does is change any plot points from Finding Nemo whenever it's necessary to move the story along. They strip Dory's personality down to nothing but her short-term memory loss, which doesn't make sense considering where the last movie left off with that, and it doesn't make her an ideal candidate to hold her own for a full movie. Everyone babies her and then congratulate her when she does something good, but she isn't responsible for a lot of the good things that happen. She gets help from all the new characters, and the universe just perfectly aligns itself so Dory can take credit for being so smart or enough of an inspiration to get her own quote. They even erase the fact that Dory created the Just Keep Swimming line. I also thought it was great in the first one that she's convinced she can speak whale just because she's confident and believes she can do anything. I didn't actually want her to have learned that from a freaking whale shark. Is there anything original to her anymore besides her short-term memory loss? The only thing that elevates Dory is her relationship with all these characters, but I don't think their interactions are that strong. Dory and Hank have a heart-to-heart, but they spend 2 hours at most together? I remember all the new characters' designs and personalities, but they're not given that many interesting things to do besides, again, be at Dory's beck and call whenever she's in trouble. Yeah, it's okay to ask for help sometimes, but in the first film, her optimism helps her solve all her problems, even when she didn't realize she found the solution. But she needs other people to do that for her now. If that doesn't show you they ruined her character, I don't know what will. I'm also not a fan of the climax to this film. Basically anything that happens after she finds her parents. I actually thought it would have been a great thing if she didn't. The first time I watched it, I thought they were going that route when Dory says she doesn't have a family, and Nemo says that's not true. I would have gone across a great lesson that family is just the people who are with you no matter what. Marlin and Nemo clearly showed that by traveling across the ocean with her for the second time in the span of a year. Clearly though, Dory's such a fan favorite character that they have to give her everything. They wouldn't have established some great morals if it means leaving her empty-handed. It's the same stupid reason Vanellope got to screw over everyone in Sugar Rush and leave her game at the end of Ralph Breaks Internet. It doesn't help the story, but hey, she's cute. We can't say no to her, especially if we can make more sequels of their parents now. A lot of people who like Finding Dory think the truck chase scene at the end is a lot of fun, but I don't get into it. I especially don't think this joke belongs here. The aquarium is a creative new location, but this movie is a shameful follow-up to such a classic film and turns Dory into a forgettable character. Number 15. Incredibles 2. This sequel just really didn't do anything for me. I don't have a desire to rewatch it, and if I did, I'd just look up the best scenes on YouTube because this movie isn't consistent. It has some really fun moments, but it always seems to be followed up by something stupid that doesn't push the story forward in a smart way like the original did. Yeah, I'm sure you can make an argument for all of these scenes, but there aren't any moments in the first Incredibles this obnoxious or this dull. Yay, new superheroes! Too bad I don't remember any of their names or care about them because they're dropped in the movie towards the end, and the only memorable thing about them is their powers. That makes the final battle compared to the original not nearly as exciting since it just meant half the people that are fighting, and they're only fighting because they've been hypnotized. The Screenslaver was such a great character until they had to go and ruin it. Why did they try to make another good villain instead of throwing a twist one at us? I also don't know how people think the family dynamic in this film is better than the first one. That's the best thing about the Incredibles, and yet they seem to do everything in this movie to make sure they have no connection. In the first Incredibles, Helen is constantly thinking and worrying about Bob until she ultimately goes to save him. We also see Bob come back after his missions and how going out and doing that hero work affects him and therefore his family. They don't let Helen do that in this movie. She is totally off doing her own thing and Bob is doing his own thing with the kids. How could this movie be good when it breaks up this amazing family? And it's so stupid that this movie continues to deal with the conflict of superheroes still not being accepted. We already got a movie that dealt with that in an incredibly smart and compelling way. What a waste of potential. Incredibles 2 has a lot of fun moments, but isn't anywhere near as smart, genuine, and consistent like the first one. Number 14. Cars. You'd think by the way I feel about the Cars franchise, this would have been right at the bottom of the other two films. It's in the same boat as Brave as it has a real boring, predictable premise where an arrogant show-off learns to be humble, learns friendship and all that nonsense, but at least the new thing they add to make it different stands out more than just a bear fight. Still, I'm just not a fan of the Cars universe, and every time I start thinking about it, my mind fills with questions as to how a lot of these things work. I think some of the places they created are pretty unique and memorable, the main characters are as well. The atmosphere is also good. I will actually say I legitimately enjoy the scene for the music and great visuals. Now, a lot of people say Lightning McQueen and Mater are a good duo, but I don't feel like they have that great of a connection before Mater just goes ahead and calls Lightning his best friend. I also cringe at any moment that shows Sally and Lightning's relationship. The scene where he notices her tattoo is disgusting. That's one question I don't want answered about this universe. How do cars get funky? Is that how new cars are made? And how did she even get that there? The cars don't even have hands. The main problem is this movie just needed more to entertain the people who aren't into cars or racing, which I am obviously not. It takes itself so seriously in that department. They even created an entire news channel which reports on the different races, and then they tried to take that seriousness and apply it to some emotional scenes where it doesn't work. This part makes me laugh because it's so ridiculous. They're playing sad music with a montage in a movie about talking cars. I just can't give these cars my sympathy. If you're into the premise, then all the power to you. However, the only Cars thing I'll ever enjoy is Down in California Adventure. Number 13. A Bug's Life. Not a lot happens in this movie, so there's nothing terribly offensive about it. It's just showing you how these creatures naturally live their life. It's not that artistic, but it's got some colorful characters that are pretty memorable. And actually by that, I just mean the circus bugs. They are the real star of the show. Not much else to say about this one except that it's just a simple, fun story. It made this spot though because it doesn't frustrate me the way all the films below it do. It doesn't do anything bad, it's again just a solid story. There's not a lot of standout moments, but I still enjoy it enough to justify multiple rewatches. Number 12. Inside Out. The first time I watched this, I felt all the feels. But then again, it's a movie about emotions. If they didn't nail that aspect, I would have dropped this movie a lot further down my list. They have a really nice setup with all the memories and how they work. It's a pretty interesting premise, but I just wish it wasn't carelessly narrated in the beginning. This movie does more telling than showing, which really weakens it. Besides those emotional scenes and moments that get across their coming of age lesson, which I really like, I'm not invested in anything else. The animation is great, and a lot of these scenes are fun, but they serve no purpose to the story and therefore take me out of it. A lot of people like the fact that they explored all the possibilities of this idea, but I think they tried to shove a little too much in, and it again just didn't work itself into the story the way it needed to. Because of that, it ends up being a cliche getting from point A to point B story. The only thing they do to keep you interested is shove all these different ideas in your face, which don't stick. Even though I have more problems with this movie than A Bug's Life, this movie has some really high highs, which is why I put it above movies I thought were just a flat line of goodness. I watch Inside Out for its emotional scenes, but I otherwise don't have a lot of great memories of it. Number 11. Monsters University. I feel a little wrong in putting this so high because it's really not that good. It follows all the tropes of a cliche college movie, however, I still find it to be more enjoyable than any of the films below it on this list. Even though they stupidly erased the original story that Mike and Sully met in the 4th grade, I like these characters enough to enjoy seeing them interact, even if they're doing something dumb or cliche. Just like with Cars 2, I'd rather watch a movie that is just mindless fun than a story that tries to be really great but fails. I think the monster universe is pretty creative. It's interesting to see all these different monsters and the jobs that they do. Besides being incredibly cliche, which I can again get through since the characters are so charming, my biggest problem is Mike. He needed a bit of a better arc in coming to terms with his self-worth. I guess he feels empowered when he crosses the line at the end, but just before that, Sully straight up tells him he's not scary, and he's told that after they continue to establish that a monster who isn't scary isn't even a real monster. It was like if Sully told him you're ugly, not even the tiniest bit pretty, but you do have a heart of gold. Like, yeah, okay, being nice is more important, but that's a real backwards way to compliment someone. People ship on him the entire movie, and they don't have that great of a turnaround at the end. He gets expelled, he didn't really win the scare games, he doesn't have anything go well for him at the end except the thing he goes after himself, which would have been fine, but they never really seem to be setting up that bleak of an ending. They have a pretty good scene where Mike vents about wanting to be a scare more than anything, and we see him give it his all the whole movie, yet they still just abruptly end his arc with a, sorry, you're just not made for this kind of lesson. It's even more of a punch in the face when the rest of Uzma Kappa, who actually acknowledge that they're built for other things, get into the scaring program. Why is Mike left out of this? He deserved it too. The least thing they could have added was a scene where Mike says it doesn't matter that he's not scary, or he doesn't need to prove himself to people, because the entire movie had been doing exactly that. This movie got its place on my list because I have a lot of fun anytime I watch it, as long as I don't think too hard about the lesson. Number 10. Coco. This movie has some solid morals and is really good at getting its lessons of family, life, death, and dreams across in a great way. Besides those standout emotional moments though, the rest of the movie is pretty average. There's still a lot of great moments in between. Hector is a charming character, the music numbers are pretty fun, the ending scene almost always makes me cry, it's so beautiful and fulfilling, but it just has a lot of filler. Again, what makes this movie stand out is the times it takes to have a solid quiet moment, and each of those moments pack a real heartwarming punch. Number 9. WALL-E. This movie is in the same boat as Coco, where it has a lot of great moments, but the other stuff isn't nearly as enjoyable. I'm not a fan of any scene involving the humans. I especially don't know why they threw in this romance with John and Mary. We could have easily spent that extra time with WALL-E and Eve instead. The main characters have incredible chemistry, a great relationship that actually grows, and they do it despite barely saying anything to each other. The two of them also build great friendships with the other robots. The design for these guys are pretty creative, and heck, even WALL-E's friendship with the little cockroach is great. This movie also has an amazing sense of humor. Mo is really funny, and the spork joke gets me every every time. There is one real standout negative thing, and it's the fact that there's actually humans in this, which I guess they did just to relay the environmental message directly to the audience, but it does take me out of the movie a bit. I also don't think the message is that hammered in, or it at least doesn't bother me. WALL-E does an overall amazing job at showing not telling, and is one compelling love story. Number 8. Up. Practically everyone knows the first 10 minutes of this movie, even if they haven't seen the rest of it. It is storytelling at its finest. Definitely one of the best examples of show not tell I've ever seen in a movie. If I was just looking at this scene, I'd probably have put it on my number 1 spot. However, I'm looking at the entire package here, and the rest of the movie is good. It's a step down from the amazing intro, but that's not a bad thing. The beginning was just so strong, the rest of the movie leveled it out. Everything past Carl floating away in his house is about as solid as WALL-E. It's above it on the list though because I think the standout moments are a lot stronger. Like the intro, or anytime Carl is reflecting on his life with Ellie, it is just so beautiful. I think it checks all the other boxes as well. It has unique characters who all have a pretty great connection, an interesting location, beautiful animation, and is an all-around amazing adventure. Number 7. Toy Story 3. Before starting my Pixar movie marathon, I said with confidence that this one was my favorite. I find it really enjoyable just because I love these characters so much. It's more exciting for me to see them interact in this one because they've already established their relationships so well. The good moments in this film are some of the best in the trilogy. I wish we got a bit more of them before we switched to the real dark prison escape, but I still find their escape interesting enough and I'm invested every time. However, and this is a big however, I hate the ending with a fiery passion. First thing to get out, I don't understand people's criticism that the ending scene is so cheesy that it's uncomfortable to watch. If I ever had to give any of my toys away, you better believe I would be this dramatic, so that part is fine in my book. I also think the furnace scene is really well done and emotional. It gets me pretty much every time. But the main thing I seriously hate is Bonnie. They faced all of these challenges and traveled ridiculous distances because they've always said to stick with your kid no matter what. It doesn't fit with the theme or things that they had been saying all this time to erase this principle just because Woody had one fun playtime at her house. Yeah, almost dying and seeing Andy's mom break down helped him realize it was more important to stick with his friends than with just Andy, but what's the worst that would have happened had he gone to college? They would have been apart for a few years and they would have come back together. Woody signs everyone's life away even when they just made peace with staying in the attic. Giving themselves to Bonnie instead just restarts the cycle of being with a kid when they grow up, and then what? Leaving them again when they're ready to move out? It'll be stupid if they actually follow through and stay with Bonnie until she grows old because they're Andy's toys. He's the one that brought them together. It just feels like such a sick twist ending because going with Bonnie was never even an option before Woody wrote that note. We barely knew her, and even Woody didn't know her that well. It's also totally stupid that the other toys had to see for themselves that Andy still wanted them. They've been through this before. When has Woody ever steered them wrong? It would have been so easy for them to cut that out and have the reason they don't want to leave be the fact that Sunnyside is actually a nice place, a great opportunity for them. I would have sided with them if they went in this direction. I mean, they even go through the effort of showing how great life there is in the credits. That would have been so much better of an ending than seeing Andy give his toys to some random girl he just met. It also would have been so easy for them to keep Andy's goodbye scene if Woody had him drop them off at Sunnyside instead. I still would have preferred they stay in the attic, which would have left the audience to imagine all the amazing things that came after that. Of course, though, Disney is notorious for erasing past principles established in their movies if it means being able to remarket something or create new sequels, which is exactly what they did with this franchise. I wish this movie kept up with the morals it had established in the other Toy Story movies. But despite all of that, I still find myself rewatching this one quite a bit, and whatever movie I'm willing to do that for deserves a higher spot on my list. I rewatch it if only to see the last sweet moments with these characters before they're so rudely taken away. Number 6. Monsters, Inc. The world that they create is so interesting and unique. I love how smart this movie is with its reveals. Like when Mr. Waternoose continues to talk like he's on Mike and Sully's side until right when Randall shows up. Only then do you realize all the stuff he said had a double meaning. And in the beginning, they share everything you need to know in a real creative way. Unlike newer Pixar movies which rely on narration to get the exposition across, they actually weave these plot points into normal conversations. The best thing that this movie does is its character relationships. Mike and Sully have a genuine friendship, they have a relationship with the villains before they find out they're bad, and the strongest relationship is obviously with Sully and Boo. I'll throw Mike in there too since he does have a genuine goodbye with her at the end. The arc that Sully goes on as he changes the way he sees not only Boo but humans in general is great and helps the story flow. The climax is also a lot of fun. There's so much to look at and it's all animated so well. Monsters Inc. is a solid adventure with great characters, relationships, and twists along the way. Number 5. Toy Story. This is just such a classic film with such iconic characters who have unique designs and interesting personalities. Their interactions with each other are genuine, they share a lot of quiet, emotional moments, but also face some real conflict together. Only problems I might be able to pull out from this film is just how angry I get at Mr. Potato Head for continually not trusting Woody. They turn on him rather quickly. The toys have such good chemistry though that I don't seriously dislike anyone because of this, even as much as I hate moments of misunderstanding. The other thing is I don't see their justification in giving Sid literal PTSD on account of him just being a dumb kid who messes with his toys. Any other praise I have for this film has already been said. I am blown away every time I watch it, especially when I reflect on the fact that this was the first ever fully computer animated film. What a beautiful way to kickstart such an awesome new art. Number 4. The Incredibles. This is so much more than a superhero movie. They nailed this family dynamic. Everyone is given their time to shine, is unique, and memorable. Syndrome is a great villain who also has a great connection with the family. His evil plan is smart, and because we see his motivation behind it and how serious he is about putting it into action, I can actually get behind his plan. Maybe not all the chaos, but making everyone super so that no one will be, that's pretty dang deep. This movie flows so well from scene to scene and has so many standout moments. Unlike Incredibles 2, each member of the family has a great arc that is unique to them and more complex than just boyfriend or school problems. The characters struggle and grow. They have moments where they doubt themselves and then they learn from that, the way any main character should. The family's conversations are written so well. They talk like a normal family would despite their unique situation. And again, unlike Incredibles 2, the audience establishes such a great connection with each of the characters, which make the action scenes so much more enjoyable. It's not just a bunch of people swinging at each other. They each have their own unique way of fighting and are smart about stopping the villain because they use knowledge that they learned before, like how the droid is the only thing strong enough to penetrate itself. I don't remember those kinds of tie-ins in the climax of the sequel. Nobody leaves the fight either to have their moment to shine because we just spent an entire movie with the characters who now realize how much they need each other and how much better they do when they work together. The family's teamwork is amazing. I always have an incredible time whenever I watch this movie. Number 3. Ratatouille. I don't think anyone can deny this movie's beauty. Just look at the atmosphere. The visuals are breathtaking. I'll admit it doesn't move as gracefully from each scene the way The Incredibles does, but the good things in this movie are just, again, absolutely breathtaking. Not to mention its clear love for food. I know it's a big part of the concept, but they get across a real appreciation for it. And these characters also show just how in love with it they are. They make great use of their environment, shrinking down to a rat's perspective and then showing the grand scale of France. This movie has a classic lesson about doing something nobody thinks you can or should do, but every element of the story is unique and done so well, it gets its lesson across beautifully. There are a lot of great inspirational quotes dropped throughout the movie, but they feel genuine. They come at a time when a character really needs it, and they probably work that advice into the next scenes. My favorite thing about this film is the ending. Words cannot describe how ridiculously perfect I think it is. You think Remy doesn't get the classic happily ever after treatment since Gusteau's closes, but I think he gets something even better. For me, the last 10 minutes of this movie are right below the first 10 minutes of Up, as one of the best Pixar scenes. It is so profound, I am dumbfounded every time I watch it. I'm seriously planning to tattoo Anton Ego's speech on my forehead. I just can't say it enough. Everything in Ratatouille is done so well and is so unique. It takes its out there concept so seriously. You want to see a movie about a rat who loves food? Well, look at how madly in love he is. I'm amazed by these visuals and complex, inspirational scenes every time I watch Ratatouille. And now down to my 2 favorite Pixar films. I cannot emphasize enough just how much I thoroughly enjoy watching each of these. However, I find one to be a lot more of a fun, watch anytime kind of movie, and the other to be a lot more artistic and profound. So which one do I go with? Let's start with number 2. Toy Story 2. This is just such an amazing film that does everything a sequel needs to do. It introduces a new strong, believable conflict, it grows the characters' relationships, introduces new characters that are interesting and who work well with the originals, and elevates the universe while still honoring everything that was established before. This movie flows really well and has a countless number of memorable and great looking scenes. Every time it ends, my mood is boosted 1000%. I love the last thing Woody says to Buzz here. He was scared thinking about his future, but by the end he's not only come to peace with it, he is excited. That's something everyone can relate to. That growing up sucks, but living for those good moments is what's gonna get you through. And gosh, these guys are just such an amazing duo. It's really quite tragic watching this, knowing where they end up after this movie, but I'm thankful that Toy Story 2 gave the characters such an amazing time to spend together and has them grow along the way. They're not even my toys, and I love them so much. And my favorite Pixar movie is Finding Nemo. A lot of these movies put up a good fight, but Finding Nemo ultimately has my heart. It was the first movie I watched for a second time in the theater when I was young, and I even had a Finding Nemo birthday party. But even removing that nostalgia, I still consider this to be not only the most perfect Pixar movie, but one of the most perfect films in general. This movie seriously checks every single box in existence. Unique, memorable characters, whether you spend 5 minutes with them or 50. Beautiful animation, great conflict, great character relationships, great lesson, great music, humor, adventure, action, emotion, just everything. I am in awe of this glorious filmmaking before the title even comes up. They establish Marlin and Nemo's relationship, the dilemma Marlin has, and the future conflict all within the first 5 minutes and with minimal dialogue. They cut from Marlin to Nemo at the best times. It never feels too soon, but they also don't wait too long. You get to spend the perfect amount of time with each character. Whenever there's a scene that shows off the big scope of the ocean and some crazy action, we go back to the small confines of Nemo's tank and the peace there. That is contrast at its finest. You can find a deeper meaning in so much of this dialogue. I discover something new almost every time I watch it. it. Every scene, every line has a purpose. There's hardly any throwaway jokes in this. It makes sure to tie in basically everything. This movie is a true role model when it comes to filmmaking. There are so many memorable moments and iconic lines. I loved Finding Nemo before, I love it now, and I will love it forever. So Pixar has had some real hits and some serious misses. In their prime, they've been able to make the most amazing worlds and create some of the most beautiful scenes ever put to animation. I know I'll be watching and rewatching their films for years to come.